red. Oh, it's not gone red. Now it's gone red. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. It's gone red now, isn't it? Wherever you might be in the world. We're joined by Mark and Bruce, and then now I'm going to get this wrong. CAG and some form. I can't do your surname. I'm sorry, Carl. I can't do your surname. CAG from Artemis. And before we start, we've had some very interesting conversations about radio and RF. And Bruce mentioned that the C2 link of choice is going to be 27 and 35 megs throughout the world. And we're going to see a resurgence in the sales of long whips and long wire antennas because that's got to be the best way to do it. Carl made the very sensible point that nobody talks about spectrum allocation, and that is so true. The World Radio Congress has been going at this for years, and I am afraid I have put them on to ignore because it's never resolved. It's just, I used to follow it and think, this year, this is the year they're going to announce whatever. I think they did announce a little bit above 6 or 8 gigs, didn't they? But it's not a great deal. I don't know if did anyone bother following that? No, obviously not.
Well, I think if you look at it now on a spectrum perspective, and there was a post I put on LinkedIn the other day, and I was talking about a company out of the US who they've primarily been a radio company most of their life, and then they broke into drones on DAS. And so they bought Aerobotics and AR, American Robotics. And I think that the way that they've gone about their business is quite sensible, because I think where they're at is they seem to have mastered the old WiMAX frequencies, 802.16, and they stayed there. And everyone's thought, what on earth have these guys? Well, why have they stayed there? This thing is antiquated. Everyone's moved on. They've all gone on to, these other license-free frequencies and whatever. So effectively, that spectrum's been left alone. So as everyone's dropped off from using that old WiMAX frequency set, these guys have obviously got a free reign. So effectively, what's happened is as people have been dropping off using that frequency, obviously the congestion has moved away. So these guys can get greater distances, the reliability is there, the spectral efficiency as they tune their radios has gotten much better. So you've got not just the kilobits that they need, they've got a little bit of broadband on certain channels or whatever. And I thought, hang on a minute. I can see where they're going with this, because they'd obviously announced that they were doing things in the Middle East with security networks and whatever. And one of the biggest concerns, and I know the Middle East quite well because, I've worked out there and helped design some of the GSM networks out there, was the amount of congestion in multiple frequencies around there. And of course, places like Dubai and whatever, you get the US military coming into town. So when they park a carrier or a few ships there, pretty much the spectrum dies anyway because they jam everything. And I just found it really, really interesting. I was talking to a friend out there in the UAE, and I just said to him, you done a spectrum scan lately on WiMAX as to where it is? And he said, Carl, there's nothing there. And I was like, I totally get it now. And this is where I think Ondas have been quite strategic. And, we'll talk about spectrum, of course, and not just the UAS service that they offer, because I think there is going to be a situation where somebody like them, they're going to start collaring the frequencies or getting the governments or the people they're dealing with to absorb the frequencies. So they've actually got that there. And I got to thinking about this, and I thought on UTM in general and their push towards the UAE, I thought there's definitely something afoot. And it's far beyond drones for police service and all of these things that Dubai want to do first. Of course, they want flying taxis before anyone. They want everything first. So I think there's quite a clever play there. But again, what they're doing is they're buying up the spectrum to allow them to do that. So I think that I'm going to keep an eye on the frequency allocations in certain countries to see, if there's a trend there on that. Because again, we do see all of these papers flying around and what things need to be. But we hear about quantum computing and edge computing on drones and the cost of low processors and all of these things. But if you're putting stuff out onto the edge, it's all well and good. You've got to transmit the data back. How are you getting it there? So, yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting point because I think spectrum is going to be another, and I'm not going to use the word obstacle, but I think it's certainly going to be a challenge in general as we move forward.
Yeah. No, I don't know. Bruce, you're a radio sort of man. Do you got any opinions on that?
No, none at all. None
No,
whatsoever.
still
Yeah.
think so.
I've been surprised we haven't had a dedicated allocation of spectrum. You're talking about before, Gary. It was 6 gigahertz or something, but nothing's happened.
Yeah.
And if we're going to make this thing, especially with like pilotless AAM pilotless air taxis, you are going to need a rock solid mission critical link that isn't used by anything else that you can guard and protect. And 2.4 gigs isn't going to do it. Not even 27 megahertz is going to do it. So they're putting the horse before the cart. We're clearing the airspace for these things, and everything's going to happen. But even the basic foundations just aren't in place.
Yeah, you blast your eyes and ears. That's exactly what I said. There's loads of carts in front of horses in this industry. There's loads of bits of it that just haven't made it into the render because it's not very sexy. All the hard bits that are not sexy are not being exposed, shown, or it seems thought about. I mean, we could create, for instance, as we're talking in the RF space, we could make our remote ID on a completely ISM frequency that we can use anything else.
This is the thing.
That.
This shows how little knowledge, understanding, skill, and awareness the people who are making all these decisions, they don't know what they're doing. They really don't have a clue. Probably no one even realizes, we're going to need a secure, dedicated piece of the spectrum for this, because these people are all just looking at dollars and bottom lines and promises, because apparently, I mean, as Jeff Bezos says, Amazon will be delivering £5 packages by 2000 and whatever it was, 2018, wasn't it? Yeah, I'm sure they're out there somewhere.
We've definitely
it's all
passed
just
it.
Yeah, it's all just promises and rubbish, and no one's actually checking anything. And there was a good thing, I think, someone retweeted, I think it might have been Brendan retweeted someone saying that about the remote ID, and like the whole thing again, the whole proposal for network remote ID with requiring an internet connection. Whoever thought of that in the first place? Because it was just never going to be viable. These people just have a clue what they're doing. And when you put regulation in the hands of people who have no clues, no context, you end up with really bad things happening.
Yeah. Well, that's surfacing again for the UK. So the current consultation, there's a new one for the open category. That needs reading by everyone in the UK, and basically telling them that RID is a really stupid idea, because let's face it, the way the Americans did it was absolutely just BS, and one of the worst implications you've ever seen going for anything. Then they talk about network remote ID, which most of the UK is good, but then it's pay to fly. You can see that creep. If you go network remote ID, that will become pay to fly. And then finally, why don't they just go electronic conspicuousy? And this was my response. Just do electronic conspicuousy for all aircraft. But I said, roll it out for manned aviation first, because, if the risk to manned aviation is more than that of a drone. So aviation hits aviation all the time, as we know. If they're happy to accept that risk, then there's something wrong. It can't be forced down drones first, because manned aviation, there's less of them. It would make more sense to test it in a proper environment on manned aircraft. It improves their safety and everything. And drones, there's 100,000 plus of us in the skies at once. You don't want us first. You want us second, actually.
Well, it's an interesting point, because there was that terrible accident in America, and I'm going to get the aircraft types wrong. I think it was a 407 and I'm not sure, but there were two firefighting aircraft that arrived at the same place at the same time together, and they had no form of ADSB or any form of TCAS on board. And the reason I'm bringing that one up is it's quite interesting, because there's two of these sort of safety channels on YouTube that are disagreeing. One is very strongly, who's one of the pilots that does that sort of thing, is very strongly for having a TCAS sort of a situation on all aircraft that are doing that sort of work, and one who's not. And that's the manned, and they're both manned aviation. To me, it seems like a no-brainer. You're going into a dangerous situation where your situational awareness is bound to be constrained, because you're flying towards a fire and trying to sort it out. It's a dangerous situation. You can have a lot of other things going on.
Well, we had the helicopter. We had the helicopters, was it in Australia, that hit each other? So we had them hit each other because their situational awareness. Now, you would think they would have ADSB on them. I would have assumed helicopters generally do, but
no TCAS. I mean, you've still got to monitor it. If you don't have TCAS, you still have to monitor the ADSB. And they knew they were operating in close proximity, but they weren't looking out for each other.
And then
then you had the Harvard and the ultralight, Harvard and the autogyro.
Did you see the autogyro and the helicopter today?
No,
an autogyro and a helicopter collided. Both pilots lost.
Manned aviation's kind of proven the point day after day, and yet our regulators just can't seem to add 2 + 2 = bloody 4. Do you know what I mean? It's absolutely annoying, the amount of over-regulation that's been rammed down drones, down this, a small aircraft, 25 kilos, you're ramming down the regulations. Again, FLARM. So some sort of electronic conspicuocy. That's what we need. We need
we need TCAS. And TCAS is now intrinsically so simple with the modern technology. There's no reason not to have TCAS on every manned aircraft. It's not a magic voodoo thing. It's something that can be implemented on a STM32 and with some probably $300 or $400 worth of electronics would give every manned aircraft TCAS. Why don't we have it? Yet we want every drone to have remote ID at a cost of $50 per, or $100 per drone per operator. If you look in America, it's 800,000 drones or something. You work out that's about $80 million that the hobby has to spend to become compliant. Yet someone who's bought a manned aircraft spent, $20, $30, $50, $100, $200,000. They can't fork out $2,500 for ADSB, or if they actually made it properly, a few $100s for TCAS. It makes no sense at all. And the analogy I always bring up is it's like the barman on the Titanic mopping up the glass rings on the bar while an iceberg comes through the wall. Let's deal with the big problems, not the little ones.
It just, it's infuriating that regulators are kind of like having the double standards, and I can't abide their double standard. I see C2. Okay, so C2 big stuff. I think it will jump to stuff like Starlink and OneWeb. I think that's how satellite. I think satellite C2 links will become standard on like 5 meter, wingspan stuff. I think that's where the C2 links will become.
I think they'll use cellular. I think they'll just go 5G. Look, 5G is being pushed as a solution to everything, and it's got all this uptime reliability.
Absolutely everything. Yes. Absolutely.
Wasn't 5G meant to give us driverless cars quicker? What horse crap we are, the public gets sold all the time. It's just astounding.
Well, this is, again, pull up the sandbag, my story of here. I'm on a private 5, well, it's not private 5G link now, but the chap bought the Spectrum thing. A local chap in the village just down the way bought the 5G Spectrum before anyone thought it'd be useful. And now the government are beating him with a stick to try and buy it off him for a huge amount of money. So I was on a 5G tower with only 3 of us on it for a short while. So it's so Spectrum. It's a very interesting subject. If you've got the money, you can get in there.
And I think the likes of OneWeb and Starlink, they're just the beginning of what will happen eventually, because the other networks will appear, constellations will appear. I'm surprised if Jeff Bezos, doesn't go for it, because he'd be mad not to, kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, that's the great thing about, there's good things and bad things about ADSB tracking and warning systems. The DJI AirSense is like how not to do, ADSB warning. It's how not to. Bruce has got the right device there in his hand. That's what you want, because the DJI one is rubbish, because you can't select what you don't want to know. I don't care about something at 5,000 feet, and when it's telling you,
all of that sort of thing is the human machine interface and other business sounding words that we can add to things. It's all the nitty gritty of it. We've got to decide on the system and run with it. And we've got to have a system that's going to be useful in 5, 10 or 50 years time. Let's just quickly jump onto a few things before I'm sure we'll certainly circle back. Skydio, how many times has Ian sent that email to us all? How many times did we say that was going to happen with Skydio? And I don't blame them at all. But what I think surprised me that's not been picked up is they said they're 1,500 customers, and my ears sort of went, or my eyes went, what? Only 1,500 customers for the X2? What if they all bought 100 of those? That wasn't very many, was it? 100 each. It's still not a big number, It's not a daily production run for DJI. So yeah, interesting.
I think that this is, again, it's one of those epidemic problems in the industry. And, obviously as somebody who's worked in the industry for some time now and building drones and aircraft, it's amazing. You get to meet a lot of these people at trade shows, and obviously I'd spent quite a lot of time at the Vegas and the New York trade shows for other reasons. And you'd always bump into people from Skydio looking for jobs all of the time. And it was quite alarming at one point. I had 4 or 5 people from Skydio coming over and handing me the card saying, give us a call. And it was like, what's going on? They said, we can just see the writing on the wall here. There's things just not going right. So they had about 3 or 4 layoffs. And then obviously this announcement, but as you say, I don't blame them. They should have done this. Here's the problem. They should have done it $200 million ago. And they just don't see this. And it's very difficult because everybody looked at Skydio as this 600-pound gorilla based on the amount of money it's raised. And it is an outstanding company. They've got some really superb technology. Absolutely, it's one of the best out there. There's no question about that. But when you start to look at the comparative technologies like Teal, George, there at Teal, I mean, he's a phenomenal character. He's now backed obviously by Red Cat, so obviously he's got good money behind him. So, Skydio at this moment in time, great, they've spent a ton of money in the right direction, but I mean, they've lost a lot of money in the wrong one. And I'm quite surprised because, the amount that they've burned through and the amount that has just been thrown back at them a couple of months ago, again, they've now got to conserve that cash because the market today, where cash is concerned for that type of thing, it's gone away. I'm quite surprised they raised what they did. So it's more of a survival thing. And I think now that VCs are starting to see the reality of the drone market at this moment in time. And as I say, I think they've made a tremendously good move going for enterprise and, looking at government. It is good. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't surprise me when you say, there's like 1,500 clients out there. That really, it doesn't surprise me whatsoever. And I think that there's a lot of that going on right now. And if you go and look, again, let's not name names, but there's a lot of companies out there that do a ton of marketing. And if you actually go and look at their financials every now and again, in regards to what they spend on marketing and what their revenues are, that's pretty much the same story. So I don't know. There seems to be a trend here, but Gary, you and I had a conversation 5-6 months ago about the market, and one thing that I was saying is, I think now for people building drones, certainly aircraft, they need to start looking at class 2 and class 3, the people who really want to do something, and start aiming it towards your military and your heavy industrial use clients like your oil companies for out to sea survey and things like that. That's where the money is ultimately. And I proved that point with a couple of aircraft that we built, and we made more money on that couple of aircraft than anything else that we ever sold. And they went out the door with about £300,000-400,000 worth of avionics on board, and the aircraft themselves, there was a ton of profit, in them. But again, I came to the conclusion a long time ago that what people are looking for are server rooms in the sky. They want total comms package, and it goes back to this conversation about what comms you put on board. And I would say that a good 100,000 of the price of that drone was comms. And I was working with a couple of different SATCOM companies. The last one was Honeywell. And, I've got to tell you that the hardware, just to get the uplink, never mind the physical uplink contract that costs a small fortune, you're talking about £29,000 for the base kit. When you start adding power supplies on, amplifiers, things like that, you're upwards of £40,000 a piece. So, and you've got to lay that out. So, again, we were in a situation where we were building aircraft there, and we had best parts of £250,000 spread around the workshop at any given time. So when you start looking at it like that for like just 2 aircraft that are going out there for class 2, class 3, Yeah, it's a very, very expensive game for people to be in if they're going to do it at that level. So I think there's got to be at some given stage now a fusion of some of these advanced air mobility companies that, again, they shout an air taxi all of the time, where they actually do recognize that cargo and military and industrial clients, pilotless is going to be the way forward. So I can start sort of like to see a meld of the smaller aircraft in that area of air taxi and the larger area of drones fusing together with some of these companies. And I'm quite surprised that's not happened already. Or a smart VC has not gone to one of them and said, no, it's our money. This is the way that we're going. And I think we're going to see a lot.
I think the only one out there at the moment that is thinking along those lines is, there's actually, there's two. Beta Technologies are really good at their idea of going to the military first, bullets, bandage and beans, and Defour Aerospace are also very good because they're going to use their smaller delivery drone to move forward their larger program. So those are the only two, I think. Did we all see that happened since we last met? That thing in Bristol, not in Bristol, where was it? At the Bristol AAN company thing folding up on the runway for its 20-foot crash.
Yes.
The name of the thing.
Yes.
Did that just not blow your mind how that fell apart if that was only 20 foot?
It has to be light, has to be very light.
Yeah.
Okay. I've made a tissue paper. Okay. Yes.
Pretty much, because to get the performance they're talking about, weight is everything. Weight is the critical factor. The more you got to carry, the more electricity you need, the bigger batteries, the heavier it gets. It's a descending spiral you can't get out of, so keep it light.
Here's something that blew my mind. And by the way, just quickly, I've just got to mention, the two companies you mentioned there, like Kyle Clark. He's one of the most unassuming guys you'll ever meet in the advanced air mobility industry.
He seems really nice.
You know the thing I love about him, and I really do, it's, the way he treats his people and the philosophy within the company where he basically makes the funding and time available for everyone to get their PPL. So they understand the principles of flight and they understand the importance of the safety aspect of everything that they do. And there's been some really great conversations with a lot of people in advanced air mobility. And, one of the things that I'd always spoken about, and, again, John was on the other week. And, I was making some comments there with John. John's a great guy. And I speak with James Earl a great deal as well. We're good friends. And the one thing I'd said, when you actually start looking at advanced air mobility and the whole air taxi model, so, when you start to look at some of the calculations for flight and what they do, and, we were talking about, an instance where they're throwing a hot potato and there is an air traffic confliction and they've got to go around or whatever, or there's a weather event or there's a crash, God forbid, of another asset on the runway. It doesn't need to be an advanced air mobility.
Yeah, black the runway. Black the runway. Yeah.
Where are they landing? Because there's no failover. And what the situation is this. The thing with aircraft today, what they take off at one weight, they land at another. They take off at one weight, they land at the same weight, but with no power reserve on board. And we were talking about this whole dynamic of flight and, how that's represented. Now, it's funny you were talking about this crash the other day, and, obviously it can happen to anyone. And I was one of the first people out to say, listen, you got to support these companies. They're doing the best. I genuinely stand by that. Innovation is what it is. And when this happens, it just makes it safer. It opens people's eyes a lot more to the realities of things. Where I think the rubber meets the road at this moment in time is yes, we've had another crash. There's been a couple out in the US, and we've got to look at what happened today. Again, there was one of the other companies that just announced another massive loss. It's happened to Lilium. It's happened to a few of them. So we're going to start seeing these crashes impact the industry, or certainly it's going to start to impact funding along the way, and you're going to start seeing people dropping out. Well, I'm at that point of opinion right now where I think that the smart guys, they're going to start to think about it and fuse. And it was quite interesting today. I saw that the guys at Volocopter have just bought a Diamond, a DA62. That was quite interesting as well as a chase plane. That's good. But it's good to see that fusion is there where they're still looking towards, manned aerospace. Now, I don't know what they're going to use that for, whether it's for training or a chase plane or whatever they're going to use it for. I'm not entirely clear what they're going to.
It's the closest they'll get to AAM.
Right. Okay.
Well, did you say the 62 or the 42 then?
I think I can't remember. I don't know.
Because the 42 was an optionally piloted years ago.
Yeah.
And it's a lovely piece of kit. And I don't understand why more fuss wasn't made of that back in the day. It was a great bit of kit 10 years ago. Diamond make lovely aeroplanes.
They do. Well, actually, there's an old mate of mine who became the president of Diamond several years ago, and then he just decided it was too much work, and then he decided to go and leave and do other things, and he's back in Dubai now. But yeah, phenomenal aircraft, and I've actually seen quite a few at the local airport. And one thing I've noticed is I've seen some of the police forces. I think they tendered out some kind of use case with them, because obviously they're a brilliant observation platform and very cost effective to use. So that's there. But I think we're going to see a very interesting year ahead. Obviously, there's a capital crunch out there. VCs don't have the money they used to. Well, they have got it, but they're looking at other areas. AI seems to be the big thing these days.
As long as you've got some blockchain with it, then you're okay.
I kind of predicted that the VCs would pull money out of
all of that. Yeah, just it's quite cyclic. The one thing that you've not seen actually, or I've certainly, because I try and observe it, is you've not seen very many people in the advanced air mobility space, trying to go public early on the small caps. There was one of them out of Canada, and it lasted 5 minutes. There was a big hoo-ha, and then it went private, and it's doing something else. Forget the names. It escapes me. It was only around that, for about 5 minutes. But it's definitely an interesting space. But I do think that you're going to start to see the UAS industry see some of them players morph in.
Well, they've got to swallow a bit of pride, haven't they? And they've got to move down to where then your players like Swoop Aero, Wingcopter, and the others, they're going the other way. They're starting small and going big, which I think is, and not huge, not manned. They won't ever be manned, but or optionally piloted. And I think those are the companies that are going to own that drone delivery space, and it's not going to be to my house with a pizza. It's going to be to a small airfield with a sizable cargo that's then moved on into town. So it's it's I think some of those big AAM companies are going to have to eat humble pie and look where their real action is.
Pilotless jetpack. Pilotless mountain jetpack for the win. Ultimate thrill.
The problem is with urban air mobility, we already have it. Everyone's trying to reinvent the wheel. We have the helicopter, and urban air mobility, where everyone's going, oh, yes, it's going to be fantastic. If it can only carry 4 people, one of them will be the RP, because YASA, the FAA, and the UK will not let them be pilotless to begin with.
No, Wolf's got the one there. Wolf's got the one about Paris. That I think Wolf's got a key point there. If it doesn't happen at that, because there's a lot of rah, it's going to happen. If it doesn't, then
you talked about the smart VC money. Well, there's none of it in AAM, because smart people won't be investing in AAM, because virtually all the companies have said our technology will not be viable until we get a new generation of batteries, and that's 15 to 20 years away. Why would you be putting money into something that's never even going to come close to making a profit for a decade at least? No, and by that time the technology will have changed again.
Yeah, and physics works against you so much harder with those machines. Now, physics for a helicopter is bad enough, but a helicopter, as it loses a bit of weight, as it burns the fuel, and it can auto-rotate, has a bit of safety in there. I'm not saying it's good safety, by the way, but it's got something. Where urban air mobility,
crumple zone.
Crumple zone. That's what happened.
Yeah, whatever it's flying above, that's the crumple zone.
And as for the Paris thing, as for the Paris air taxis that are flying, they only carry 2 people, allegedly. That's what they're saying. It's a 2-person aircraft. And if they were to allow that to even automate, what's the point in 2 people getting it? I'm sorry. What's the point of 2 people? That thing will have to fly maybe 5 for 10, 15, 20 minutes. It's going to have to land, recharge, and then go back again. How many are you going to need? You'll need 100 to shift 200 people. It's going to be absolutely crazy. I just don't know.
I think the point that Wolf's making really is it's on the timing. I think it will be interesting, because if they don't have it working by then I don't think it's going to be in my lifetime, and I'm unaware of any dread diseases at the moment, so it might be a bit longer, but I don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime. I do think, and I think Ukraine's showing it with, I believe that no one is actually saying it, that they're using those Malloy heavy lift multi-rotors to do the Kazivacs, and that's there's an inflection point. If that proves to be the case, that will be a little bit historic in our world, but I don't think has anyone actually seen proof of that.
I've seen an I've not seen theirs, but I have seen a airframe of one that was just a couple of miles down the road from me. So I have seen.
No, I've seen one. It's big.
But I've not seen.
When does DJI drop its delivery drone again?
Tomorrow.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Tomorrow, but it's only small. Mick saying, did the MiG-23 have a crumple zone this week? And that was very impressive, wasn't it? Boom, boom.
Wasn't it just? Yeah, but we've got airplanes falling out of the sky at shows. I mean, that's happened. What was the one back in November? Was it with the bomber? And I mean, these things, the FAA seems, yes, it's an acceptable level of risk that these things fall out of the sky and people could be killed. But we can't have you flying your this over your roof to inspect your roof tiles after a storm, because that's commercial and it's too dangerous, and you need all this registration and regulation. Oh my God, I'm going to do a video shortly just pointing out the utter idiocy of these people and how they've just lost the plot totally, and people are going to die, or people are dying because of it.
Well, and Bruce, you're right. It's the hypocritical part I can't buy, where if manned aviation can fly a plane over an urban area to land it in an airfield, or overfly urban areas, because the CIA deems that risk acceptable after we've seen what happened to the 737 Air Max, the 8 Max, we saw its problems. We've seen other planes that don't quite make it to where they should do, sadly. And remote pilots have even put aircraft where airline pilots have put planes where they shouldn't, sadly. All CAAs or national aviation authorities accept there's a level of risk they are happy with, that manned aviation could possibly, unfortunately, kill someone on the ground, a third party that's uninvolved. They accept this level at some point. However, for drones or small unmanned aircraft, they accept absolutely zero as the answer. They absolutely want to make sure it could never possibly happen. But these urban air mobility aircraft that are coming, they're going to let those fly? Really?
No, physics will stop it. But anyway, let's just move on, because we can go through some topics now, because we are all excited about the DJI delivery drone coming tomorrow. I mean, I've been on the edge of my seat all day just considering it. Now, is this going to be? I don't quite get it, because loads of people use that size DJI thing anyway at the moment. So what are they going to bring to the party that will make it wow? Or does it just make it a standard off-the-shelf DJI product, so that's okay? And will we be able to get them after the 1st of September anyway? I don't know. To the floor.
If DJI do it, they do one thing very well, and that is software. So if they manage to do the software side correctly for delivery, they will make everyone else look quite bad very quickly, as in precision going from A to B. And I think that's where DJI may have a bit of an ace, because their aircraft do fly rather well. They're easy to operate, and their software is very easy to use. And if there's a good integration of that, I want to deliver that over here, and it's just done, and it goes and does it. They've got downward vision sensors. They can tell if an aircraft can or cannot land. So when it gets there, it could possibly move itself to a flatter area, because their aircraft can already do that. They've been doing that since the Mavic.
Land on soft things like children.
Yeah. Do you know what I mean? But that DJI, I think the software side of it could be one of their hands.
And they do have some really good packages with this. There's the Bomb package, which comes with 3 batteries and a munitions rack.
Yes. Yes, you're exactly right. Yes. Well, I believe that's the different one. And of course, we're rolling towards September the 1st, and we'll see what this ban really means. I'm not sure. There's many different versions of the story out there. What the implications of it are. If it really is all the bits that everyone finds useful, including motors and all that sort of thing, as well as just the weight, then it'll be interesting.
I've been talking for a long time to a lot of people in the US about what was coming, and my phone started ringing a few weeks ago going, "Hey, you hear the news?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's been coming a long time." And there's a couple of companies in the US who make some really good motors, and they're not the cheapest. And it said to them, if you scale production and you get them to the level of what some of the T motors, because they're good motors. I mean, it's quite funny. You mentioned before about Malloy and the ability to do CASEVAC. We built part built, and the parts are still floating around. Something called the XMR, which would lift 150 kilos easy, and it was based on 150 kilos to lift me and a load of baggage up, and I was going to be, the first, person to actually say, well, let's laden it with weight and do that. And it was so funny. We'd actually introduced it, and there was a video that went out about it. We started building it, and it was amazing. The first people that we're talking to was the US military. And he said, forget the casualty. We want to stick a minigun on that with a ton of ammo. It's like for close air support. And I was like, okay, that can be done too. And again, people weren't actually understanding, the whole idea of utilizing a platform for CASEVAC as well. They thought it was going to take off to 50, 60 feet or higher and take some soul who's bleeding out to, a waiting Chinook out the way. Well, that was never the idea of it. The idea of it was to hedge hop and just get him out the way, pop some smoke and move him on. But again, I think we can see a future where you've got that for that military CASEVAC situation. I mean, you couldn't normally use that for someone who's, been in a car crash on the M6 and they need to get him down to the hospital. That ain't going to fly. But for military, that use case, it's there. And the one thing that astounds me at this moment in time is, and again, I will use the word, BS, it's for Maxwell Live, but it's smaller format. Because again, all of these companies that say, oh, we're doing this, we're trying that and the other, I'd say now there's very few companies actually out in Ukraine doing what they said they're going to do. Because I speak to people every day in Ukraine on the front line, in different areas. And some of them, again, they're Ukrainian people who have got to know since the beginning of the war, where they'd ask me if I could do certain things with drones and help them. And it's like, well, with what exactly? I mean, there's no money. There's absolutely no money in the game out there. And I know a lot of people who have gone out to try and do things with Ukraine, drone companies, and they come back broke. The only people who are making money are people who are supplying drones where their governments are saying, there's 100 million quid, go and give them drones to Ukraine. They're the only guys making money. There's nobody actually making money out there doing anything. But the juice out in Ukraine it's a perfect testing ground, and it's like when you start to look at
First and Second World War, isn't it?
It's brilliant because air environment, them guys, I mean, it's worth them sending, $100 million worth of kit over there just for the testing. I mean, wow, it's a free testing ground. So you've got all that going on in the Ukraine at the moment. And I think that what we're going to see from that, and I think it was in the defense paper that was issued today, it's come out and it's totally changed the way that defense are thinking about war. I mean, that's what Ukraine has done. It's just changed the face of procurement now for the future. And it was so funny. I was talking to somebody the other day about, what we're starting to do out there. That's the one, yeah. And again, when you read through these, when these come through because of the role that I'm in at the moment and some of the things I'm doing, I have to read these things back to front and look at things and pick at things and try and guess where they're going or what they're thinking. And after reading through some of these documents, to a certain degree, I don't even think they know what they're thinking in certain parts of it. But yes, I think that we're going to start seeing a big phase shift in regards to what they're doing out there. But again, there's very limited companies that are actually making or doing anything in that game. But I think where people seem to be losing this is and losing perspective on this. It's not a place where you can make money selling drones. It's a fabulous testing ground for the companies that have got the big books to, learn everything that there is. And, I was talking to somebody the other day in the military, without going into too much detail. And I'd actually said to them, I said, do you honestly think that Russia is wheeling out all of the tech it's got in the background to fight in Ukraine? Of course it isn't. That's why they're using reservists, old tanks, old men, young lads. They're throwing all the cannon fodder out there. That's why they're getting murdered at the moment, because they're not going to use any of their fifth generation tech in this skirmish. They're just not going to do it. And there's a lot of people sort of like thinking, you could be right there. And Patrick there, well said. Again, we do. One thing that, and I've worked with Russians, a lot of scientists. I've worked with Ukrainian scientists out of Kharkov University on radars to detect suicide bombs, and worked on radio technology and stuff like that. One thing I do know is about Russians is they're not obvious, and chess is their game. So they're not going to show their hand, and they're certainly not showing their hand in Ukraine with some of the tech that they've got right now. I was out in 2010 in Yekaterinburg, and I was working with some scientists there on some radio technology. That was superb, but the way that they'd gone about it was bad. There was no user interface that anybody could make head and tail with, unless you had, you're a Cisco certified professional. You just couldn't use it. The technology had seen nothing like it, and I'd been working with people out there like Motorola, and next door to the plant, I remember one day it was snowing and I couldn't see anything, and I drove about 40 foot in the wrong direction, and I had about 14 people pointing their K-47s at me, and I was like, what's going on here? They just appeared out of nowhere. And I got told, he said, no, that they do small unmanned things in that place and nobody can go there. And I always remember that night. Just basically being put in a card and asked 20 questions with someone with perfect English as to why I felt the need to do that. And, pretty much I was out the country the next day. So Russia, they've, again, I don't think we know half of it. And again, loitering munitions, just put there, they've had them since 2007. Actually, they really, they've had them, and they still got them now. But they're not wheeling them out for Ukraine. They won't do. They're not going to show their hand. So I think it's quite interesting, and they know as much as to what not to do to show their hand. I mean, we've seen. I remember I was reading about some of the manoeuvres of the Royal Navy, and pretty much everywhere where they took the Queen Elizabeth, the Russians were within 30, 40 miles of Queen Elizabeth everywhere it went in international waters. And they were doing acoustic listening for every nook and cranny and noise that the screws made, all of these things. And I was sort of like thinking, that XMR drone I was talking about before, in respect to Kazivac, I thought, no, why don't we make it more water landing, where it can actually land between the Russian asset and the Royal Naval asset, and just lower something into the water and just blow Iron Maiden through the water or whatever it is, just to hide the acoustic signature. Or, have something that can fly away from the boat and like put sonobuoys out and just leave them there, that are emitting a sound. So again, I think that there's lots of things there. There's lots of lessons to be learned, I think, out there with what the military are doing right now. But as I say, if people think that Russia are using all of their tech, and I think people are mistaken. They're not stupid. So I think that, we're going to see some interesting things come about soon.
I also think lots of people don't realize the technology that has been around for years, like Bruce, has been around for years, and they don't realize there's a lot of it. I mean, another pull up a sandbag, but on an exercise in the Bay of Biscay in Nimrod in the early 80s, we cheated. We got airborne half an hour early before the exercise. was due to start, and all the boats that were going off to sea switched off their kit. And before we left the circuit at St Morgan, just from the radio noise that the ships were making, we'd identified most of what we had to go and do before we'd left the circuit in Nimrod at St Morgan. And that was just from the radio noise that the assets make, let alone anything else. A long way away. So I think people do really underestimate the technology. They don't know the technology that's out there. And that's sort of in a little way that plays. Where do I want to take that? I want to take that. So that plays into the bullshit of a lot of modern counter UAS systems. There are systems that work, but a lot of the ones are just these guarded switches and a load of LEDs and wires in a box.
But they can detect bombs.
Oh, they can detect any. You can detect anything you like. Yep. And then such utter rubbish.
I think what it boils down to as well, and one thing that I've certainly seen firsthand, because I've worked with a lot of departments and universities in the UK, and I was out to the States and met a few people out of MIT, some ridiculously clever people. We're not using our talent at all in the Western world, and people who want to work in defence who just can't seem to get a foothold or don't get listened to. And some of the bods I was working with doing that suicide bomb detection thing, we were backwards and forwards to London all the time, and one of the guys was getting hacked off with people using the cell phones in the quiet carriage on the train, and then he pulls out this box of tricks one day, and I thought, what on earth have you got there? It looks like a bomb. And he just flicked the switch, and you could see everyone like this with the cell phones. What's going on? He turned everything off, and I was like, what is that? He said, it's peace and quiet. That's what that is. And the 72-year-old guy with a soldering iron in 20 minutes on his hands just turned off every cell phone, like for 9 carriages either way. So I actually made a point of walking down, and everyone for 9 carriages either way is like this on the cell phone. And I said to him, you do realise that you turn every cell phone and cell tower off either side of the train as we're going along, don't you? It's like, do you think so? I said, I know so. And that was it. And it's funny when we got
Kilo of C4 would have done that as well.
Exactly. So you've got people who can intuitively do that in 5 minutes if you give them the task to do, or if they're motivated enough to do it. And I just don't. It blows my mind that the money's not made available to these people within universities.
Is it not that old adage about, when you're paying more for your marketing department than your engineering department, or your marketing department and your engineering department are disagreeing in what they're doing? It's like, I think we're getting quite good at marketing departments in companies now that are way ahead of their technology is vastly superior to anything the engineers can ever generate. I think that's the world we're living in. It's a bit of a problem. It's just
here's one for you. So, fact. I remember talking to somebody when Valancy went pop, and they said to me, wow, your aircraft, Carl, and their aircraft, we were looking at theirs and we were looking at yours, and they've just been taken over by Sierra Nevada, so that's less of a risk for us to go to Sierra Nevada when they get their act together. But I said, yeah, that's fine. And it was only over lunch, and he said, so what did it cost you to get your aircraft, which is exactly the same as the Valancy aircraft, the Volley 50. He said, 20 million, 30 million. I was like, looking at him going, oh, God, no. He's like, oh, you're close to their money. I said, £610,000 exactly from inception to in the air and sold. And he's like, oh, you're joking. And I was like, no. And they blew through 70 million doing the same thing. And I said, basically it's 6 lads in a barn conversion in Norfolk with 30 acres of land. And again, it was all carbon molded. And again, nothing was scrimped on. There's no Chinese parts in it, nothing. The thing was NDA compliant to the hilt. And we'd done it for, from scratch, 600K in 4 months. And most of that was spent on going to external bodies, getting the airframe properly carbon molded, and a few mistakes along the way. And we got that thing off the ground and sold to the Home Office. And it's, for me, it's just mind-blowing the amount of money that is spent out there doing these things. And by the way, we made a damn good profit on that as well. So again, I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned out there by a lot of companies in regards to what they're doing. And as you say, a lot of it is marketing, a lot of it is websites, promotion, it's trade shows. And we went to DroneX once, and I think that was expensive. That cost us about 14 grand, but we won 3 contracts from it. So we actually, we came out of that making money. And I think that we were probably one of the only guys out there with some of the contracts that we were awarded at the end, United States Air Force and things, before obviously things, took a different direction at the company, where they just didn't want to be in the big aircraft business anymore. But we'd actually proved out that for very little money and with a very small workforce and not wasting a ton of money on marketing, that it can be done. You can be a success.
You're not suggesting for a moment these things are not anywhere near as complex as some people make them out to be.
Well, I mean, let's not go there. I mean, again, it's this mystical side of things that it's that you don't want to know how hard it is, and it's so funny. I went to Washington DC, and they were talking about the bombs that were going off in Istanbul. There was Brussels airport, and there was this absolute terror of suicide bombers everywhere. And I was on CNN in a few countries talking about this and what we could do with millimeter wave radar, and just with some simple algorithms. And everyone's going, "Oh, you're an AI genius." I'm like, no, it's machine learning. It's really, really simple. And I remember talking to someone, and I got told to shut up. And it was like, well, the YOLO algorithm to identify a person and a dog and a car is freeware. And most universities have got it as freeware, and actually it's brilliant. And there were companies trying to flog this, and they were like marketing this stuff for 10, 15 million quid in marketing budgets. It was freeware with their logo on. And it was like, it was phenomenal. When I was showing people this suicide bomb detection system, and I'll send you the videos, they said, "Oh, well, Carl, that's quite primitive because you've got to physically point that towards the person." I said, "No, that's the handheld. You've not seen the one on the tripod that will actually track you whenever you move. So if you're coming towards an embassy or something, the camera in the bottom of the CCTV, the crosshairs there, you can software move the crosshairs and you can get them." And again, it's like talking to people and saying machine learning algorithms and these simple bits of code. It's high school. Some of it's high school computer club stuff. It's not that complex. And it's, again, I'd go to conferences, and I remember being at one down in London, and it was for SMEs, and I think it was something like a 5 million award for SMEs. And I'm there, and I'm like, side to side, I've got the chairman of BAE on one side, and I've got some other guy from, who was it at the time? Everything was Kinetic on the other side. And I'm like, hang on, what's like a chairman and a board member from 2 of the biggest companies in the UK doing here after the crumbs for SME money? And it was so funny. I remember the time just standing up in front of everyone and just basically calling out Amber Rudd on the spot in front of everyone and saying, look, this is an SME day. We're all here. I said, and you've got the chairman of BAE here, you've got this board member from Kinetic. What are they doing here in SME day? And I was like, and no one could answer. Well, we'll get to that bit. I said, no, can you just give me an answer now? And then everyone started standing up at the conference going, actually, that's a valid point. What's going on? And in the end, I just shook my head, and I just thought, I'll just take my leave. I went outside, had my vol au vent and my cup of tea, and I left. And
there's your marketing budget, you see, and that's what really matters. The scale of the vol au vent.
And
you misspell your company.
Yeah. So that's it. But it's like, I do talk and send messages to some of the guys. Kyle Clark's brilliant. He always responds. If you've got something to say, he actually goes. And there's other guys in advanced air mobility, and it's like, they're terrified to answer you back or say, "Oh, that's a good idea. Yes. Maybe we should talk about this." And it's like recently, I've got to the point where I'm thinking, the guys to talk to are the venture capitalists who've sunk 600 million into a company and it's still losing money. Why don't you just go and pay for people like, James Earl, myself, Bobby Sakaki, those guys? Just just come and get some practitioners of reality to come and help you, and we'll probably save you a couple of million quid for like.
Well, there's your schoolboy error. Practitioners of reality. You're going wrong.
What am I talking about?
Yeah, what a ridiculous idea! What a ridiculous idea in the year 2023. What a strange concept. Yeah, no, it's yeah, I really like the I've forgotten that you've just mentioned his name. I've forgotten his name now. But I really like
Bobby.
Sorry,
Bobby.
Bobby. And the guy from the guy from that I forgot the name of the aircraft. Doesn't matter. It's tired. I'm late. But I really like that company.
Beta
Kyle, and I really like the 4 as well. Those are my 2 of the larger picks. Those are the only ones I really watch with any proper interest, because I think they're on the right track. And then I really like Wingcopter and Swoop Aero, and a few of the other ones down at the bottom that are making a difference. But there really is just mostly noise in that market. Very little signal, an awful lot of noise. Awful lot.
There was a guy I was introduced to by James Earl, funnily enough, who's out in Japan, and he's again Asa, and he's a great guy, and he's taken the approach of seeing what's happened. And we had all the hoo-ha in the UK of the big exhibition in Birmingham for advanced air mobility. And they had mock-ups of everything there, and everyone saying, "Oh, what a fabulous thing this is!" And it was like, I don't think I'd been so disappointed in my life since I went to Kennedy Space Center to go and see everything that I thought was real, and it was actually a mock-up. And when I got told that, I was like, I should have just spent my time with the kids, with Mickey Mouse, because it's the same thing. And that's what it reminded me of. And I thought, well, it's a great showcase, and there were people from the Home Office there, and they were flying drones in and out. And I thought it was generally good for the drone industry to have that, but that's all just died to death. And it's like the big players like Ferrovial, a gargantuan company, one of the biggest companies in the world for infrastructure, and started talking early on to those guys about their vertiport models. And you could see some of they spent a small fortune on consultancy designing their platforms, and said, well, what happens in this emergency situation? You've got this dependency on an absolute vertical landing. So what about where something's got to come in? You've got to gain some airspeed because there's been a failure. It's nose down, rate of knots. It's got to have some format of a runway to land on. So I've just seen some proposals here for, maybe this one in New York, this one in San Francisco, this one in London. So, and you want to put these in prime locations. And, again, the point before, we've already got it, helicopters. And, there's many times I've mentioned on LinkedIn, I used to fly around the world, all of the time. I've been non-stop, and I've been in helicopters in my life 14 times. That's it. I'd actually counted it out the other day. And that's somebody who's like really, really gone at it. So I'm not entirely sure where the market is going to be for people to use that. And, again, the access to helicopters, I can go and take a helicopter 4 miles from where I live. Liverpool Airport's down the road. I've got Barton 10 miles down the road, and then I've got Manchester 20 miles down the road. So the access to helicopters is there. I really don't know what I would, even if the cash was there for me to frequently use them, I'm not sure I would. So you've got that thing. But again, to the point of the matter is, when you start looking at the overall cost model of advanced air mobility, urban air mobility, air taxis, all of these things, we know what they cost. We know what the operating costs are going to be, and they're coming out with these, X dollars per seat. It's like, you're going to buy some land in New York to land these things. Okay, have you got any idea what that real estate, that plot of land that could fit a skyscraper or 4 skyscrapers on, that you're going to put your that's like close to maybe $900-800 million in land, maybe more. So once you've actually got your vertiport there, even if you mortgage that for 100 years, and you've got to make a profit on that, you've got to start really looking at the Excel spreadsheet and sort of like getting a grip of reality of your numbers. Because, I've done some cost models, and, one of my friends on LinkedIn, he's been on that reality TV, Ryan Seahant. And, again, I'd met him in New York, once or twice, and again, astonished at the price of a plot of land in Lower Manhattan. I mean, you're talking like telephone numbers ×3 for land, never mind apartments. So where are they going to put these things where they're going to be accessible to the people who might want to use them?
Well, and you've got to remember that the FAA has actually said a heliport is the vertiport layout. They've already said it has to match a helicopter layout, design, everything, and space.
So apart from the laws of physics, not enough people to use them, and really expensive land, it's a brilliant idea.
It's a winner. It's guaranteed winner.
Yeah.
And those vertiport things, also remember that unlike helicopters, which can land, take off and fly somewhere else, or land and refuel in 5 minutes, these things have to sit there for an hour and recharge. So you have a whole area, the parking area, where all the craft lining up to recharge so they can get there 20 minutes of flight time for an hour of charging. And then when they're being used the batteries are being used at a much higher C rating than in an EV, so you don't get the 10-year battery lifespan. You get what you get out of model aircraft batteries, which is typically 200 charge cycles when you run them at those high C capacities and high charge rates. And you've got to then amortize the cost of that battery replacement every 200 flights over the economics just do not add up at all.
Well,
you wait
again, reverting back to again what you're talking about, the batteries, and not to go over old ground. And there were some ideas I had around the advanced air mobility model. And, it's like, okay, if you're going to be flying, for example, let's just use some names out there, an Archer or a Volocopter or whatever it is. If you've got like a unified battery pack that all of them things can use, and you've got a massive charging station with, 40, 50 of these batteries always on the go. So when they land, it's like aircraft fuel, it's Jet A1, that's the end of it. You've got one battery, one fits all. That's it. It's tested. It's there. But again, nobody seems to want to go for that type of model, even though the technology is still not there.
And it wouldn't work as well either.
Yeah, you've got to start thinking about it before you. Yeah.
Yeah, to have the unified battery thing, it's added weight because you've got to have the mounting points, the connection points. That adds quite a significant weight burden to a craft, which is solely reliant on being as light as possible to have that performance that'll give it an economic viability. So that unified battery pack thing, I don't think it's as practical as people say it would be.
Well, I've got some of the Jane Seymour VC fairy dust here, and I'm going to spray it all over the thing, and
here's the other problem with these systems is you've got to get the local infrastructure in. Trying to get that much juice into these places will be so hard and expensive. Putting a few car chargers in that can do like 50 or 100 kilowatts, even car charging stations have problems. If you say, we want 10 350 kilowatt volt charging station here, do you know what? The local infrastructure just laughing.
The infrastructure, the infrastructure just to get it signed off and connected to the grid takes years, doesn't it? So
and people will laugh at you if you want that kind of power. They'll go, "You want that? How much?"
That's the problem I have here at Vertiport Africa. In fact, I'm struggling a bit today because we've actually had power since 1 o'clock in the afternoon until now. And we haven't had power for this long, for ages, and it's a bit weird. It is a bit weird. Don't quite know what to do with all these electrons. It's
so funny, Gary. You mentioned that because in our earlier conversation, we were talking about some of my background before I got into all of this, and I'd worked on telecoms and I'd spent an awful lot of time down in South Africa, and that was back in the days when cell phones were just starting to make an impact there. And obviously it was South Africa that out of all the countries, there was only select few people who had cell phones back then. And, everything was pretty much a prepay model. So it was a tough time there. And I was dealing with like Cell C, Vodacom, all of those guys back in the day. And I was in and out of Joburg, then down to Cape Town all the time. And listening to what they wanted to do with their network. And here's where this ties into exactly what was just said. It was, we don't have the fiber infrastructure to run to the cell towers. So that's where your laser ideas of fiber through the sky using a laser and modulating the data over lasers is a great idea, Carl. But also we need to look at radio spectrum as well. You know, can we tweak these radios to do this over license free, because we can't afford the licenses either, because we're totally getting hamstrung by the government, and we can't make any money because we're on prepay models. And it was interesting. We put the infrastructure in, and there's no electricity. So it's like, okay, we've just saved you an absolute fortune, but there's no power to it. And if the power keeps blowing the way it blows without the breakers in place that we need, that system that I've put in there is going to be dead in 3 weeks. And it was so funny. And they said, "Oh God, can you make it last 5 weeks?" I said, "Oh, come on, guys, behave yourself. You know, stop being sarcastic." He said, no, we break even in 3.5 weeks. If you get it to 5, we really make money. We can replace the laser system. And I was like, what? Because the prepay model, the way it was working, they became the most profitable cellular companies on the planet.
That's right. That's right.
And a lot of people don't realize that. But again, it's this whole infrastructure. It's the whole power thing. Now, I'd mentioned before, I'd spent a lot of time in the UAE. And again, working on a lot of their problems out there in regards to communications and things like that. You know, we were talking about radio and whatever. And again, they were utilizing different radios. They were looking at laser technology. And the Dubai's problem was exactly the same. I remember the first time I ever went there, I stayed at a hotel called the Dusit on Sheikh Zayed Road, and that's where Dubai ended. You've got about another 35 miles of Dubai going towards Abu Dhabi that exists now, that didn't exist back in 2003, 2004. And you couldn't lay a fiber cable. It'd get dug up in 5 minutes. So they were going through, Etisalat was burning money. So everything in that part of the world had to be wireless because of the construction. And the infrastructure situation still in Dubai now is power. Power is the problem. They've got real big problems out there, and they can't solve them. The only way they're going to be able to solve them is, you know, some kind of a nuclear capability further down the road, you know, to start doing things out there, and small nuclear reactors all around the place. So if we start adding into the mix this situation where we're going to start needing this amount of charging for advanced air mobility, you know, again, add that into the major cities, like, you know, well, it's not just Dubai, but the UAE in general. You're talking about hundreds and hundreds of millions of spend just to facilitate a vertiport.
Well, so, you don't even need to get as far as getting to the demand stuff, because I know of one. Well, I've said it before on this. I know of one drone delivery trial on Lake Victoria, where the guys pitched up, and the group that asked them to come there did it in good faith, and the guys pitched up, and they required more power to charge their battery sets than the island generated. So and that's small scale. You know, that is just your M300s or whatever it was. It was something like that, just a large scale multi-copter. And that needed mopping up the solution for that, to how to do that. So already, you know, the people parachute in their solutions from the West without realizing that, because they just absolutely expect to be able to plug in and demand whatever power they need. Like, it's not how it works in a lot of the world. it's very interesting. They're talking of hydrogen and hydrogen certainly isn't green. It just wants to get out. I think that's my the biggest problem with hydrogen is it wants to leave whatever you're trying to contain it in.
And don't forget, hydrogen takes twice as much power to create.
I think it's more than that.
Yeah, it's like 3 to 1. It's 3 to 1 against generating it. So you use 3 times the power to generate for 1 unit you get back. Then it leaks. Then you've got to be able to transport it. You may as well just be burning fuel. You may as well just be burning diesel or jet A1. You may as well just put fuel in a helicopter, basically. And urban air mobility in a helicopter makes sense. It just wins on so many levels.
Now, lights in the medium. We've gone over the hour. I was going to ask Carl something else, and I can't remember what it was. But it's been very, very, very interesting. I think we should run away while XJet's not here, and then just leave him with a blank screen. I don't know where he's gone. Is there any other stories we've seen this week before we go that we should talk about, just to give Bruce a chance to come back?
I just need to apologise for not being here for the last few weeks while I've been out
Where
flying.
you've been, and where are you at? I guess you're selling units and your trials are done. I've seen some pictures of your displays. You still haven't done one live for us, but I suppose winter's drawing in over there, so you should have you should have a nice nice evening where you can do it while we're all here.
Hopefully, yes, at some point. It is just time, because at the minute we've been testing shows for some clients, so they've got a show in Scotland. We're going to go and fly it for them, so we've been testing that, just making sure the swarm's good. It's really interesting. It's really fun, although I keep getting savaged by bugs in the night.
Funny enough, I flew the other day, and for the first time I could see. Did I say this last week? I could see all the little bugs flying past the camera every once in a while. When I landed, there was bugs everywhere in my lovely little hotel. Absolutely everywhere.
We were, as they were combining nearby, we were getting the knock-on effect as all the bugs are, they're kicked out of the wheat and everything. And it's just me and Ben are in the middle of the field going, yep, getting bit, just having fun.
I remember what I was going to say to Carl. I really started taking notice of him when he started India. When people have seemed to have missed what's been going on in India, in that a lot of companies are claiming to make stuff. And I've always thought India is a huge opportunity. I can see it as being a huge opportunity. I'd love SES News to be more involved. We were going to have a guest on from India tonight. I don't know where he is. He might have chickened out because he had something quite controversial. Well, it was not controversial, actually. It's factual to say. But
I'm going to say, interestingly, we've been approached by someone in India who wants to buy our drone. The problem is, they say we've got to ship it in parts, in component form, because they can't have it arrive in one piece, and it's like, oh yeah, it's just horrible. But but then I think we're the only manufacturers in the UK for swarms drones, so it's quite nice. We did actually we've got a swarm going to Belgium. So the Chinese drones are literally a lot cheaper than ours, but ours are so light, got better features. They came to us instead, which was quite nice.
Well, Carl, absolutely. The India situation is just crazy, because there's big companies with big political friends that have managed to set themselves up and get themselves into, we're the best in the world because it says so on our brochure. And it's just repurposed stuff you can buy from Alibaba, and they're saying made, designed. We have done all the R&D of this in India, and they're getting away with it. It's a terrible situation.
I can honestly tell you that I probably turn away about 200-300 friend requests or LinkedIn requests from India away, and the reason is Garuda Aerospace. I always like to point them out and say, actually, that's not made in India. It's actually this. And by the way, could you put the sticker on straight next time? And I'll just call them out, and I'll copy Government of India, no messing around. And one thing that really stuns me about India is this: you've got a good number of really cracking good SMEs out there. I mean, they're really good. And then you've got a company that's been beavering away out there for quite some time, and they've recently been highlighted, and they're called Idea Forge. And they have also been, in my opinion, probably one of the clean practitioners out there of the US industry, and they've been very, very clear about their mission and what they want to do. And they've been talking for a very long time about, again, made in India, why that's important, why they need to be able to do certain things a certain way. And I think that they are a true patriotic company to the Indian cause. And this happened, and the focus that I had on India was for two reasons. Number one, I could see what was going on in the marketplace in regards to the anti-Chinese sentiment, and obviously the fact that to do this properly on scale, you're going to need somewhere like India, because they've certainly got the brains and they've got the energy to do it. And in certain areas, they've got certainly the infrastructure or the capability to spend money on infrastructure to obviously have their own industry, because nowhere in Europe is going to be able to compete at that level. That's for certain. So the salvation going forward is probably going to be for, I would say, the next DJI is probably going to come out of India. Again, someone's got to spend a lot of money, and they've got to invest hard on software engineers, because it's all software as far as I'm concerned for that play. And again, you've got to start looking at other players who can influence the market massively. And, you know, we've not seen these guys in the Western world as much as I think we're going to see them soon, is the likes of Aerodyne, who, as a company, again, they one thing I really like about them guys, to earth, they're down to earth, they're humble, they don't make any broad claims. Their business, they've made money from day one, and their business model, what they're doing is great. And when they move into a country like India, and you know, I noticed this, and this has not come from them, even though I've got to know their management team, since most of the stories I've had from Aerodyne have either been from people who are their clients or people who were in other jobs and have gone to work for them. And, you know, again, the opportunities and the education side of it that they presented out in India, and the opportunities for them people, I think it is brilliant. And, you know, I'm not saying, oh, you know, let's all sing Heal the World here, you know, but again, it's a company that actually does want to do some good. And when it goes to a country like India, it understands that the inward investment needs to happen in India, and the money in India needs to stay in India. And this is what I was trying to get over to a few people. I must have had about 13, 14 people approach me to say, oh, you know, can you bring, you know, PRT, you know, over to India, and, you know, we'll invest in you, we'll do this, we'll do a joint venture. And I said, well, first of all, I said, I understand the way the Indian market works, and that is not going to fly on a government level. So I'll come out there, do all this, spend all this money. I'll lose everything doing that. I said, basically what you need to do is you need to effectively, what the companies in India need to do, if they do want to start doing that type of thing with some of the really clever Western companies, is there is going to be a lot of financial clout and money available in India. And I can see the smart money in India going to, I mean, again, I talk about the great companies in the UK, and people think, oh, you know, when we were, you know, PRT, we had our competitors out there. They weren't really competitors. They're just industry colleagues who are absolutely brilliant. And I think there's 3 or 4 companies in the UK that could be targeted by some of these players in India to go in and help them to do things, and, you know, take their lessons learned from the UK dealing with the CAA and, you know, all of the failures, and helping them to accelerate really quickly. And I think that that's what's going to happen in India. But again, you know, make no mistake, that means that, you know, it would be people within those companies going out to India, and, you know, again, committing to that, you know, and, you know, if that was someone like myself, that would mean me going out there, having, you know, some format of a temporary or, you know, a residency out there. Again, proper tech transfer. We're not talking about, oh, let me make money by shipping you kits and you can build them. Forget that. No, you want the manufacturing jobs to be in India. You want tech transfer. You need all of that in-house. You need that in the country. And I think that that's the model that needs to happen. I know, you know,
Philip Rouse is just opening a factory in India.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, brilliant. Yeah. And again, the guys, Philip is one of those, again, I'm going to call him practitioners of reality. And, you know, he's also he's a savvy businessman. And he, you know, the writing's on the wall. I mean, we can all see it. You know, and it's like I've said, you know, I think that the drone industry in the EU at the moment is knackered for SMEs. If they, you know, if they're looking at military or heavy industrial, unless they've got a big backer behind them with deep pockets and patience, they're dead. Other than that, you've got to get in bed with one of the military primes if you're military focused. Otherwise, you're dead. So I think India presents a massive opportunity for the drone industry as a whole. And I'm not saying, I'm not advocating a brain drain from the EU for people to go and work in India tomorrow and, go and help them with their causes. But I think that, again, early conversation with some of the people in India is, some of them who've got deep pockets, is whilst there's certain things you can't do in India, you can certainly export certain things from India over here, like your money, and have your R&D shops working for you over here, because if it's Indian owned, it's a different kettle of fish. So people are not thinking straight about the business models and how it can be adopted. And I can certainly see that type of situation occurring. So I think that people have underestimated India for a long time. I think now with the anti-Chinese sentiment, and by the way, the real thing's not hit us yet, because a lot of people tend to focus on companies. If you actually go and read in the background, so you've got all the rare earth minerals that China is starting to hold back from the US. So magnets for motors, all of these things, certain other items, well, that's going to kill us. Other side of things, this saber rattling in Taiwan at the moment, people are going, oh, that's China being China. No, there's method in the madness. Pretty much you've got 4 factories out of about 7 in the world that have got the best and most capable silicon foundries out there. So pretty much anything that's commercial, high-end from AMD and people like that, they're going to put the hand around the neck of it. So interesting.
Well, the only good thing about a lot of those silicon factories in Taiwan is they need a certain component that only comes from one place.
Yes.
So if they did take Taiwan, it would make no difference to them, because those plants would almost be rendered useless instantly.
I get that. And I'm sure that's there. But again, it's the infrastructure to actually do something with our raw material that we just don't have. And again, I've just been writing a piece for somebody who wanted some information and some deep dive on things and perspectives about what's going on in the world of drones for the military and defense papers, and where are we at, and why is there such a delay for the Western world to catch up with China and all of these things. I mean, you can go and listen to Palmer Luckey all day long and whatever. And one of the guys who I do share a lot of perspectives with is a guy called Will Roper. And Will's spoken a long time about the way that things designed and built over here. And, I've worked with a few companies. Again, I don't see them as, competitive companies. I see them as colleagues in the industry. They're brilliant. And when we look at the way people design and build things these days, that's all old hat now. A lot of people have got to start learning how DJI have done a lot of what they've done and how they work today and how they get stuff out so quick and so good. Is they've been using digital twin models for the past 6 years and plowing tons of money into that. So they're not actually wasting a ton of money making copter A, copter B, prototype, crash this, crash that. They're getting it as best they can using digital twinning to actually simulate, emulate everything, and then get it as near as damn it, and it's all run through. And then the next thing, they're producing something that's 95% there, which requires maybe another 10 weeks of tweaking. And by the way, once they've got that model built, they fly it and whatever, they learn it all, and it's all back there. And where did that all come from? Formula One racing teams, mainly in the UK. So again, one of the greatest things that we've got in the UK here, which has been the Formula One teams doing that whole analysis of the car data, having the digital twin for, this component of the car all running in the background. It got that advanced that pretty much after one race, there was I think 8% of the car was redesigned by the computer, saying that, okay, if we mold this that way, if we shift that 2 millimeters that way in this race condition next time, the configuration of the car needs to be like this. And if you look at some of the data and some of the ideas coming out the Formula One racing teams, if you actually track the progress of what they do with their cars as they use them from beginning of the season to the end. So if they've got a winning car that gets podium position at race 1 this year, that car, if they put it on the grid next year, it wouldn't even qualify. So when you start thinking about how quick we can design and do things, and you look at what DJI have done, and people have wondered how they got the jump on everyone, it's that. they actually did what the Japanese did. They took everyone's ideas and just made them better, but the Chinese learned that lesson from the Japanese. So that's why DJI is as brilliant as it is. And again, it's not a big secret how they've done it, but people just, they scratch their heads and go, it must be money, it must be the Chinese state. It's not. They saw what Formula One was doing in cars and the incremental changes that were being made, and to make them so brilliant at what they do, that they thought, we'll just do that with our drones and save a ton of money. And that's exactly how they've done it.
They're also very key to, right at the beginning, they had a failing helicopter controller, and they saw quickly the copter control, and they saw us, and they flew the guy out from Australia and said, tell us about this. And they were able to change track quickly and bravely, I suppose, and get on with it, and then put it in a decent package. They've done a lot of things right, and 3DR could have been, but GoPro played 3DR really, and DJI played them both, and we'll see how that's worked with the
the Karma, fantastic.
Well, with DJI coming into the handheld action camera market and taking a chunk of GoPro.
Think of how effective the Karma would be in Ukraine.
Very
falling on people.
Very falling on. Yeah, I know. We've gone an hour and 25. This has been very, very interesting. We're going to have you back, Carl. And
anytime, because it's as I say, I sit on the side and I usually listen to this conversation while I'm beavering away, and it's quite interesting. And John was on the other day, and I was like, it was just great. Again, we've spoken offline, and a lot of people back in the day said, "Oh, XMR, and he's doing this jackal. You must be arch rivals." And it's like, get lost. It's like the industry is not like that at all. It's not
big enough either.
I do love the UK industry. I think it's brilliant, and a lot of people are, they're not sharky. I think everybody at one time works. Everyone thought that the bee's knees, and they all had the great ideas and that. And I think everybody has suffered tremendously at the lack of money in the space. People have had to get resourceful very quickly and beg, steal, and borrow from things. And it was so funny. People who we initially bumped into when we started out didn't want to know us. They'd sneer us at exhibitions, and then they'd end up in a situation where there was a company, they bought a rather massive drone from the United States to do a medical trial. And when the drone landed, when it landed here in the UK, we got a phone call and they said, we need a favor. So we've just had the delivery of this rather massive American drone from Texas, and we can't even start it. We've got a demo in 3 days, and there's going to be people from the government and the NHS, and I said, well, look, if you can get it to us, the lads will work the weekend, and we'll take a look at it for you as a favor. And luckily, I left my home. We all went down to the workshop in Norfolk. This thing landed, and a couple of our guys, they said, we can't even do this in Norfolk. We're going to have to do it in the Lincoln facility, which is like it was a big, roller shutter garage. And we got this thing in there. I'll privately send you the videos of this thing. I actually called the CEO of the company in the US. I was that disgusted at what he'd shipped over here. And I said to him, you're making out that you're supplying the US military. I said, you need to stop what you're doing right now. I said, because this getting flown over like people here in the UK, I said, this is a death trap. I said, it's going to get reported. I said, I'm going to be sending a report to the CAA on this thing. I said, I'll do a full report to the people who bought it off you. I said, and it was just disgusting. I mean, it was like, the parachute system that was on board. I mean, the thing weighed it was supposed to come in at 25 kilos. We weighed it at 72. Okay.
Yikes.
72 kilos coming out, honestly. And the parachute on it, when we'd actually got it, I'll send you the video of it. We went there, and the small tiny screws that you can find in a domestic 3-pin plug in the UK, the old ones, the parachute was held on with them, and 2 of them were missing. And then we found the snapped Allen key in one of the safety release mechanisms for the batteries. So we actually called the people concerned and said, look, it's overweight. If you do need to show it hovering just to prove the point to the government, we can probably get it to hover for a couple of minutes, but you can't move it up the hover. Just maybe circle it around, and probably will do it for you. So we managed to get it where it needed to be. After 3 minutes, we landed it, and the motors had started to just basically disintegrate the props. They were that hot. It was that overweight. So that thing's now a coffee table, actually, and it's been redone. But basically, what it goes to show is that company's now gone out of business. I don't need to tell you who it was. They went out of business very, very quickly out in the US. And basically, they were just shipping crap all over the place and dangerous stuff at that. So the one thing I will say is the UK fraternity, as in, the guys out there doing things, really, really safety conscious people who, do their best. And I'm a big advocate of it. And, we're going to have to wait and see how things morph out. But I think, UAS in general, I think we've got an interesting several months ahead of us. Certainly with this overall situation with the Chinese, not just over in Europe, but it's everywhere. So I think that, India is going to be the one to watch. And, we'll take it from there, I think.
Yeah, I definitely, for years, I've thought India was going to be a really big thing. And what you've described with your thing, I know my chum who will watch this tomorrow because he's too old and lazy to watch this tonight, basically spends his life fixing stuff for people and getting tests done for his opposition when they call him up and say, help, it doesn't work. There is so much of that going on in this industry. You just wouldn't believe it. And he doesn't seem to win contracts through it, though, but he does help people out because you can only do the right thing in life. That's all you can do.
I mean, the contracts are beauty contests most of the time over here. And I hate to say it, but they are. They're beauty contests. I mean, you've got a bunch of companies over here who, by the way, and they've got great people in them. They really have some first-class people. And they're past masters at, dining out on DASA and MOD money. They're really good at it. They know what to do. They've got brilliant bid teams, and that's really well and good. But given a proper chunk of business or a real requirement call where you've got to scale up and build in quantity and actually make money, let's see if that ever happens. But as I say, I still stick to my guns on this. I think that unless somebody is massively funded over here to do things for the military, or until a big government prime buys into it. I mean, let me tell you a fantastic one, which a lot of people missed, and I think BAE themselves missed it when they bought Prismatic. Prismatic, I mean, what a cracking bunch of people. And what BAE did there was something rather magical. And I don't think they realized they did it themselves. They left them alone to get on with their job. They didn't give them all the bureaucracy and all of that usual government prime red tape. I mean, I think it's changed now. They're being folded into Falcon Work, so I don't know if that's going to change. But what they did there was quite unique by buying into a company and leaving it as an SME with that SME culture in there. And what's this one?
That's if you want problem solving in Africa, this group are quite good at it. I don't know who that bloke is, and he's too lazy to stay up at night. But this sort of places our gear ends. But the number of fixes and the number of delivery trials that Luke has rescued, I cannot begin to tell you. But anyway,
do you know what I find amazing? I was when you see companies, we're doing this and this is a world first, and it's like,
it's world first.
It's world first. It is.
It was world first, world leading, world first.
And I remember showing somebody something, and it was a video out of Norfolk, and I said, "Oh, right. So, what did you say that was carrying in weight?" And it was such and such. So that, oh, right, okay. I said, I really wouldn't go shouting at that being a world first. I said, I know about 6 companies who've done it. We're one of them. So, I've just, it's a moot point. And his comeback at me was, well, didn't you bullshit once? And I was like, sorry. I said, didn't you make a claim that you did something with the United Nations and you broke some world record and you never got, Guinness Book of Records wouldn't recognize it or something like that? I said, no. I said it was an asset that we built for the United Nations, and they were doing sorties out in Somalia with it. And when they sent us back the flight data, and they were taking 10 kilos of payload out to where they needed to take it, and they were doing 4 or 5 sorties a day non-stop, and the round trip was approximately 20 odd miles. So when we looked at data for Guinness Book of Records and all of the telemetry and all the data that was coming back from the United Nations, again, British Army officers, Belgian officers doing the data, we'd realised, the people who were claiming to have broken records, well, we've smashed it. And we didn't just smash it. This was a totally autonomous, I wouldn't say totally autonomous, but let's just say an autopilot setup. And it was just taking off every day. They were dropping seeds because it was more of a UN program, and I think it ended up doing just short of about a couple of 1,000 miles of journeys before the batteries packed in, and then the batteries need to be replaced. And people were talking to us about this, and it's like I said, that's something that we did want to apply to the Guinness World Records, but the amount of data that they needed and some of the disclaimers they wanted signing from the United Nations, we couldn't get through. So we supplied them with the data and whatever, and they said, oh, well, we need X thousand pounds to go and validate this. And it was like, you know what? This is a pointless thing. But it was so funny. I ended up sending him the letter from the UN with all the data on for Guinness, and it silenced them in the end. But there's so many companies out there that are doing groundbreaking stuff who just really aren't into the marketing hype, who are doing smashing things.
I know, and that's exactly why I started SUS News, and they're very welcome to send me PR, and I can sniff out the bullshit, and they don't. Sometimes when they get in, when the real rubbish stuff gets in, it's because I know, dear viewer, you can also smell it and you can see it, and some of it is chuckle worthy, so it's worth putting in. But I do try and surface the companies that other places just don't reach. That's why I started. Yeah. It's what I want to do.
I mean, in the UK, we have got some great problem solvers here. That same as Luke. I know a couple of guys. There are some great guys out there that can do stuff that people just don't get.
Don't know, and they don't know they're doing it, and they don't shout about it because they're the sort of people that go on. Oh, actually, we're going to go on to do the next idea that's grabbed them, and they don't wait to make noise about it because they're on to the next thing.
Yeah,
which is good.
Just keep working away.
Yeah, it is, and there's a guy who I've known since the suicide bomb detection project that we did, with the Home Office and people like that, and he's an amazing physicist, and he's become a very good friend of mine. And we got talking about 4 years ago about the need to be able to disable. Again, the world was in a frenzy because of suicide bombers, and we were talking about disabling suicide bombs and detecting them and disabling them. And then we got talking about drones and how to disable them, and it was so funny. So we revisited an idea that we'd had back in the day, and he was telling me, oh, by the way, do you know that component that was like costing a fortune? We can get it off the shelf now from this supplier, and you won't believe how cheap it is. And then, oh, by the way, and did you look at that capacitor technology? And we're like, right, okay. We've now got the ability to work with a drone swarm company, put a small payload underneath in place of the light, which is probably not that much heavier than the light that they use for the drone display, have a swarm, and collectively fly over a target or an asset. Now, that target could be a person. And again, utilizing radio spectrum, you stick enough power from the drones down in one spot. Basically, that cell phone or whatever they've got on them, good night, it's off, it's done. You can do that with a convoy. You can do that with a ship. So you can go and turn off the bridge on an aircraft carrier with a swarm of drones, and it doesn't matter if they've got a phalanx gun shooting out the sky. Enough will get through to do it because I don't need to, emphasize, because obviously there's people who know what these things cost from here. But when you've got actually a drone swarm, and you've got that relatively inexpensive bunch of a couple of hundred assets, and you only need 40 or 50 of them to get through with these little things on board, it's a very cheap weapon to take out a multi-billion-pound aircraft carrier and just wipe its electronics without firing a shot. So, and the intuition and brains to do that, the UK, it's again, there's a phenomenal amount of people in the UK who have got these ideas and the money to bring these to fruition. It's not big money at all. It used to be. It's not anymore. So I can see, a lot of conversations taking place soon in regards to, the defence paper that came out today and the path forward. I can see a lot more coming from that above and beyond the basic understanding of bigger drones transporting greater weights, and again, the overuse of the word, again, it just, I grind my teeth, the overword, the overused words, AI. It's just, okay, let's just call it what it is. I think that we're going to start to see some big developments, but I think certainly the people who are in the light display business, I can see certainly a nice transition into the drone swarm business, utilizing, again, different frequency technologies to certainly give the enemy.
If only Mark knew anybody that had ever done any counter UAS trials, if only he had ever been, that would have been really handy for him. If only he had done that work. But anyway, look, we are getting late now, yes. And I'm sure there's clever people in New Zealand as well, Bruce, and even Australia.
I don't know them.
Well, Australia. Well, we know Australia does.
Australia is, I would say, at the moment, I think that's a phenomenal place for expertise and testbed of new technologies. And again, you've only got to start looking now at what they're doing in the maritime space with uncrewed submarines, uncrewed service vehicles, because they need to get their numbers up to, obviously make the Chinese think twice about going anywhere near that they want to go near. So I think Australia at the moment, I think it's going to be a hotbed of, well, it already is a hotbed of innovation. I mean, there's some brilliant companies out in Australia. So, and New Zealand alike. Again,
I left my electric blanket on this morning. New Zealand is a hotbed.
Yeah, that's the note we must go. We've been running very late. This is my third time of trying to shut this one down. We've got to go. It's because you must have you back. Divya, wherever you are in the world, look after yourselves. We'll see you again 2100 GMT next week. Perhaps that person from India will dare to come. I hope he hasn't been silenced. Will dare to come next week. Take care. Look after yourselves.
Take care.
Bye-bye, everybody.